The 19th century forced a brutal reality. Rapid industrialization and the threat of mechanized warfare meant old systems of rule were suddenly obsolete. To survive these new geopolitical and economic pressures, every major global power recognized a singular necessity. They had to completely restructure how they governed their populations. They built a new administrative toolkit to extract and manage resources. Specifically, they constructed 5 core pillars: taxation, conscription, a professional bureaucracy, public education, and social welfare. We can observe this by mapping 6 nations: the UK, France, Germany, Italy, the US, and Japan, against these 5 institutions. Through military coercion, imitation, and global networks of administrators, these countries flooded the matrix with the exact same administrative tools. Yet, possessing identical institutions on paper did not produce identical governments. Taking an inventory of a nation's administrative machinery tells us very little about its actual power. True state capacity is determined by how those institutions are configured to penetrate the society. A common assumption in political science is that a strong state requires a massive, top-down administrative machine concentrated in the capital. France provides the classic realization of this model. Inherited from Napoleon, the French state operated as a rigid hub-and-spoke network, driving mandates directly from Paris to regional prefects. The center used public schools and standardized language to manufacture uniformly loyal Frenchmen. In these classrooms, the state systematically erased local dialects and customs to create a unified national identity. The United Kingdom proves that a massive central bureaucracy is not the only way to build a strong state. Instead of a sprawling bureaucracy in London, the British integrated their society through parliamentary supremacy. They maintained control by delegating specific administrative duties to municipal governments, favoring gradual legal adjustments over rigid central dictates. They also leveraged their commercial empire, utilizing colonial wealth and naval logistics as an external extension of their domestic state capacity. The United States represents an even sharper departure from the French centralized ideal. The U.S. developed what is known as distributed capacity. Rather than hoarding power in Washington, the American state built its strength by spreading it outward. Governance was shared dynamically across state legislatures, federal courts, and local schools. Even with this decentralized structure, the federal government possessed immense extractive power. The Revenue Acts of 1861 and 1862 instituted taxation that reached into daily economic transactions to fund the Civil War. Both the UK and the US demonstrate that distributed networks and the delegation of authority to the periphery can generate extractive and administrative power equal to a monolithic central authority. In the mid-19th century, Germany and Italy faced an identical challenge. Both needed to forge a single unified nation out of fractured, independent regional states. In Germany, Otto von Bismarck engineered a highly specific strategy for integration. He recognized that independent states like Bavaria and Saxony already possessed highly capable, functioning administrations. Rather than destroying them, he actively chose to leave their existing capacities intact. Germany was constructed as a federated hierarchy. The imperial center rested firmly on top of these regional power structures, extracting resources without erasing local competence. Bismarck extended this logic to social welfare. When he introduced his social insurance laws in the 1880s, the system utilized pre-existing mutual aid societies rather than establishing a new state-run monopoly. This design permanently intertwined the interests of the state, labor, and employers. By giving everyone a shared stake in the system's survival, Bismarck created structural ties that made the new empire nearly impossible to dismantle from within. Italy took the opposite approach. Following the efforts of Cavour, leaders from the northern region of Piedmont pursued integration from the top down. Piedmont did not view the Italian South as a capable partner. They treated it as a backward territory to be conquered and standardized. They aggressively overwrote the region. Pre-existing local institutions were ripped out and systematically replaced with Piedmont-specific administrative codes, regardless of local conditions. The result was the alienation of the entire southern population, widespread armed resistance, and deep-seated political distrust that calcified into the persistent southern problem. Imposing standardized institutions across a territory actively sabotages a nation if that process destroys local trust and dismantles pre-existing regional capacities. Following the Meiji Restoration, Japan faced an acute existential threat from encroaching Western powers. A gradual evolution was impossible. The state required an immediate overhaul to survive. Japan executed what is called compressed modernization. Rather than adopting the 19th century toolkit over decades, the Meiji government deployed every single institution simultaneously. The pace of reform was blistering. Under architects like Okubo Toshimichi, the government abolished the centuries-old feudal domains in 1871. By 1873, they had already instituted mandatory nationwide conscription and a comprehensive land tax. They adopted the French hub-and-spoke model, but operated it at maximum velocity. Administrative power was driven straight from the emperor's central government down to the individual village level, bypassing intermediate authorities entirely. To ensure compliance, the state manufactured loyal subjects out of the peasantry. Through rigid family registries and highly structured moral education, the population was uniformly conditioned to serve the nation. By fusing military conscription with a land tax that funneled every yen into the central treasury, Japan built a machine that required constant movement. Because this survival logic tied domestic integration to territorial security, the colonization of neighbors like Taiwan and Korea became a structural necessity for the state's continued growth. Returning to our matrix, we can evaluate the long-term consequences of these decisions. The initial deployment of these institutions restricted future options for the next century. Once a state chose a specific set of central or local anchors, that choice became a permanent structural constraint. These administrative mechanics carry a heavy human cost. State building is the duality of formation. A state only grows strong by performing acts of inclusion and exclusion simultaneously. Education builds a unified citizenry, but it intentionally suppresses and erases regional languages and local identities to do so. Conscription creates a new form of civic equality by dismantling feudal class structures, but it achieves this by militarizing the entire male youth population. Social welfare protects vulnerable workers from absolute destitution, but it simultaneously enforces strict labor discipline and coldly categorizes who is deserving of help. Modern states built their capacity through these practices of exclusion and assimilation. Their strength is derived from their ability to unify the population by marginalizing or erasing what makes it diverse. The variations in our modern governments reflect the foundational choices made by their architects, decisions on who to integrate, who to overwrite, and exactly how to project power into the daily lives of their people.